Characteristics of the incident commander. We all know what good characteristics are, and we'll identify some of those things in here, but I bet we could very quickly put a list together of bad characteristic of incident commanders. The reality is it takes some training, takes education, takes some experience to get to the level that you want to be in the incident command role. On the routine stuff, we learn by repetition how to do things, but when it comes to those things that are outside that routine, normal thing we do, like a car fire or the small structure fire type thing, or even some larger house structure fires, we would deal with those things quite routinely. But the incident command system, one of the best things about it is it's very expandable. It can go to a larger or smaller scale at any point. So that's one of the beauties of it as we go through this. So a few things here, and I'm going to ask you to stop and think for a minute. Most of us can probably identify some of the command within our staff that have a lot of the things we're going to talk about. We can also probably identify a few that maybe have some of the other things that we look at are just the opposite of what we're going to talk about. So, use this. I know there's a lot of gold on here tonight as far as gold badge type stuff, personnel, and that's okay. But use this as a learning opportunity. Really take it to apply to your concepts and your principles in what we're doing when we talk about incident command. So, one of the best qualities of an incident commander is somebody who listens as well as makes decisions. We need somebody authoritative that can come to a final conclusion, and that's the decision they're going to make, and that's how it's going to enact at that point. Sometimes decisions fail, and you have to revamp, and the concept of don't ride a dead horse, that applies here. But listening is a key concept to be a good leader or a good incident commander, and be able to process everything that's brought into your brain, out your tongue, so you can basically educate those around you on what the task is, what the goal is, and get everybody moving the same direction. Next statement on there says they're not blindsided by a situation where things go from bad to worst. So, when you look at that and you think the term blind, we're used to the term blindsided, where you're hit out of the blue and you don't see it coming. Kind of the same thing with blindsided. As incident command, I know they talked earlier about not getting involved in the tactics. You're not the person going into the structure. You're not the person on the end of the hose. I realize in some small departments, you may have 1 or 2 or 3 guys during the day, and that may be a little bit of a variable, and you have to do what you have to do to make that work. But not being blindsided, being an incident commander and somebody who steps back, you have to be a big picture person. And there's the analogy of using the train. If you're sitting in your car in front of a train going on the train tracks, you look left, you see 5 or 6 cars. You look right, you see 5 or 6 cars. In incident command level, you have to get in a helicopter and go up a few hundred feet, so you can see the engine of the train and the caboose of the train and every car in between. That's how you have to think as incident command. You can't get blindsided because you're not looking at the big picture. And it's really easy to do. It's real easy to get into tactics. Most of us come up through our careers and our ranks. We start with tactics. That's where our heart's at. That's why we got into what we're doing, helping people and being able to get out there and be the guy doing the thing that needs to be done. But as we progress in our command structure, as we progress into incident command level response, we definitely have to be able to have that big picture perspective. Being in touch with subordinates, that's key, and communicate goals and objectives. Subordinates, we have to have relationships. Now, there has to be structure in the business that we do, meaning there has to be a structure that somebody's finally in charge and somebody makes the final decision and everybody else goes with that. And it's easy to follow a leader who is a good listener and somebody who makes good decisions and takes your input, whether they follow it or not. If they respect your opinion, that's what's important. But the subordination, you also have to have relationships, and most of us, we do a lot of things. Smaller communities, we're friends. We go to birthday parties of each other's kids and things like that, maybe even some of the larger communities too. But, when it comes down to it, we have to have that structure in place, but we also have to have the term relationship. Relationship without some rules can be a problem. So that has to happen when we're on the fire ground or any response that we have. Being able to communicate those goals and objectives is absolute key. You can have the greatest knowledge base in the world, attended every class, every program, hold a master's degree in everything under the sun. But if you cannot communicate what's in your brain to get everybody going for the same goal and moving for the same objectives, that's going to cause a real problem because they're not understanding. And I ask each of you to think for a minute, have you ever been on a scene where there's people in charge and things are happening, but you have no idea what's going on? Now, that doesn't mean the lowest end guy is going to have every detail, but he should know or she should know what those objectives or goals are. what we're doing, why we're doing it, and when we do this, what's it going to complete? That's what they need to know. We have to communicate that information. Most of us are a more dominant personality type in a lot of these services, and we'll do anything as long as we know why. We really will. But when we're doing something that we think stupid because we don't understand, it gets a little more difficult for us. And that's when you start having some issues. Think about that in your leadership style. You have to communicate your subordinates. You have to have a relationship with them at a professional level at a minimum where everybody understands and respects the chain of command and structure. And you have to be able to communicate what's in your head. That makes it successful. The other thing is, as incident commander, do not be afraid to ask advice from other incident command positions. Now, many of us that are in a leadership capacity, we've done that. We've been on a scene with another chief or another captain or another whatever it may be, peer of your level, and you're like, okay, I'm thinking about doing this. What do you think? Kind of brush that off of them. It goes back to the two brains are better than one concept. And that's really what applies as a good incident commander. You're listening again. Somebody may have a different experience level for the thing you're about to do and maybe have experienced that or done that or has more education in that. And they can give you some advice that may be good and solid. The end result is if you are the incident commander and you're not working under a unified command concept, we'll talk about in a little while, then you have to make the final decision and you live with the results of what you do. So again, don't be afraid to ask. Maybe you have a seasoned firefighter, maybe you're a newer leader and somebody's been on the service for 20 years and you're at a gold badge rank and you've been there for 9 years. 20-year guy's probably got a lot of input if you need a little help in maybe a decision-making process or concept. Follow the structure, follow the command, but that could help. Don't be afraid to ask. So looking at some good behaviors and traits of an incident commander, we read through this list. As an incident commander, you have to remain calm. You can't lose your cool. You can't become the screamer. You can't become the person that starts cussing. You can't become the person that starts shaking with the radio in your hand. Now, inside, you may be feeling all of that, but on the exterior, you have to remain calm. We probably have all experienced in our past a person or two that wasn't real calm when they were in charge. You have to be decisive, somebody that can actually make a decision. And as an incident command, you have to be able to make a quick decision. You're going to have to get information, you're going to have to process it, and come out with a direction or a flow or a goal or an objective of what you want to do. Again, the good listener and communicator, which I hounded on here just a minute ago. Experience always plies into the fact. That's a great thing to have. In what we're doing there. So, having that experience is a good positive thing. Now, would everybody say just because somebody's been on an agency or department or been on for a long time, they make a good leader? The answer to that may honestly be no. We have natural skill leadership, people that have the ability to do that. They're just kind of sewed within them. We have people that are educated, trained, practiced, and experienced, and they do a great job. So there's different levels of that, and each agency hopefully recognizes those people. But, as experience is a key aspect of what we're doing. So you have something to base your decisions off of. How we train is how we're going to respond when it boils down to it. If we have no training, we're just going to make the best of our abilities. And our hopes are at the end that it came out well. Also, in incident command role, you have to be very adaptable. And by that, we basically mean that you have to be flexible. You may have the greatest goal, objective, idea in the world, and you start it off and you institute it, and it eventually bites you right in the behind because it just isn't working. You have to adapt immediately and make another decision and go a different direction, do something different, get some quick advice, follow some guidelines or protocols or procedures if your department has them. You have to be adaptable. Again, going back to the information and opinions kind of falls along with the listener and the communicator concept and responsibility. The other thing is you have to be able to delegate. We've all probably seen leaders in our past, whether it's our work responsibilities we have, if we have a Monday through Friday in addition to being firefighter or whatever it may be, we have to be able to delegate. We no longer in the role of incident command can be the guy that's been stressed, I think before, can't be on the end of the hose, can't be the guy running. Have to be out there has a different level. You have some that have hundreds of thousands of dollars a year budget or multi-million-dollar budgets, and they have paid full-time staff and have a lot of people, and they're able to do a lot more than maybe what somebody who's a volunteer department that in some cases may still be doing pancake breakfast to try and make ends meet to make it work by the end of the year. So there's all kinds of different levels in there, but you have to be realistic of your expectations of what your people could do. and again, be flexible and adaptable to those things as they apply and take place. Goes back to respecting abilities and others' opinions. It goes back to the communication tool again. Everybody's got good ideas, and if they're part of that structure, maybe you need to bounce stuff off. You need to listen. I think every time that I go to a scene, I've been doing this for a long time, and I go to scenes all the time, and I'm learning something new every time I turn around. Just being willing to be a lifelong learner in that capacity, understanding that things do change, and there are smarter people than me by far, that's for sure. I guess if I was perfect, I wouldn't expect that anybody could tell me anything, but I'm far from perfect. So I'm always willing to learn, always willing to listen. And that's an important thing for me. That's basically some good characteristics of an incident commander, something that applies to each and every one of us, something that we need to be able to do. We're going to roll into now kind of talking about incident command responsibilities. I believe Mr. Gasprich is going to come back in here and have a conversation about some of this, and he's going to talk about the incident command role, how long you can last in that incident command role, and talk about some of the effects on the body. So it's not just a perception thing, it's actually something that you have to understand. The body can only do so much and the brain can only do so much. So he's going to address some of those things for you.
We lost audio there for a minute, but it came back. I don't know if we had some bandwidth issues or whatever, and Greg just walked off with the mouse. So anyway, we'll just do it with the computer. There's this 6 to 8 hour thing on there, and I'll tell you where that came from. Many of you have either heard about or have been to the National Fire Academy out at Emmitsburg, Maryland, and you may have taken classes out there. There's a program out there that they institute that is actually the executive fire officer training. And so what they do with the executive fire officer training is they actually have them do projects, and they go back and do research, and they can actually take a look at some of these different things and learn from them. So one of the things that they tasked the students to do was they asked the students to actually go back and look at scenes and see how long the initial incident commander was actually on scene and how long the initial incident commander made effective decisions on scene. So what the parameters were was the decisions had to be made so that there was either no injuries, that there was no additional problems that were created by the actions of the responders, or that there were no deaths. And so when they started looking back at this was a situation where the initial scene was under control. They had things in place. Things were going well, and then things kind of went haywire. And then looking at the scene decisions, they were able to determine that those events happened after a 6 to 8 hour period. And doing more initial research, what they were able to find was that they could attribute those things that had gone wrong on the fire ground to initial decision, or not to initial, but to decisions that the incident commander was actually making on the scene. So what they found was that 6 to 8 hours into this, what happened was these people who were incident commanders actually started making some bad decisions. And it led to situations where people were injured, or the situation got bad, or there were some improper uses of resources. Now, why is that? Why is that 6 to 8 hour window so important? Well, if you look closely at it, what you find is that when you are an incident commander, you use a lot of energy. Okay, your body has to actually go in, and your brain is very energized, and you're using a lot of energy. Your body stores energy, and it stores it for a period of time. It actually stores it in the liver, and it stores it as a product called glycogen. And so what happens is, when you look at this from a biological standpoint, 6 to 8 hours into this, what's happened is your brain really has run out of energy. It's run out of food. And so what happens is that you actually get to a point where your brain is not making rational decisions to support what needs to be done, because you're basically in a situation where you don't have the energy product to do it. It's called glycogen, okay? And so what we look at here is that these people are in a situation where they are having some kind of a biological response. It doesn't matter how well you're trained. It doesn't matter how long you've been doing it. It doesn't matter how familiar you are with the situation or your responders or the people that are there with you. What it has to do is the fact that your body physiologically cannot do what it needs to do. All right, so you start to have a breakdown. It's from glycogen. Glycogen is an energy source. It comes from carbohydrates, and it's broken down and it's stored in your liver. And it's basically when your body needs extra energy, this glycogen is released, turns into glucose, and your cells can use it for food. If you study this closely, what you find out is that in that 6 to 8 hour block, these people are starting to get in a position where not only are they making bad decisions, but if you actually go up and start looking at them and studying them, they physically look like they are worn out. And what's happening here is the fact that they, again, have kind of run out of energy food for the body. So this glycogen. So not only do we need to get people out of this situation 6 to 8 hours into it because they're stressed, we need to get them out of this situation because, quite frankly, they're going to be doing some really bad, dumb things because their body doesn't have the ability to store that energy. So that's another reason for us to take a look at that and say 6 to 8 hours into this, someone else needs to come in there and be the instant commander. Really step up to the plate and say, you know, IC, chief, lieutenant, captain, whatever, we need to bring somebody else in here and you need to kind of take a break. So there is actually a biological reason for that. Now, obviously, everybody stores and uses energy differently, okay? And a lot of it depends on what kind of physical shape you're in, if you're sick, whatever. But it boils down to the fact that 6 to 8 hours into this in a stressful situation, you are running out of your ability to make good, effective decisions. All right. And I think this one's going to be Greg. We're going to talk